Hold on. Everything that I have opened has been closed down. Just give me a few minutes. So, very good afternoon. We have lost some 5 minutes in the process, 5 to 7 minutes, probably 10 minutes. I don't. Oh, it's almost around 15 minutes we have lost. But nonetheless, we will. So now, coming into the discussion. So, what are the things we have learned in our previous classes, and what we are going to learn today? Hello. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes.
So, what are the things we have learned still now in SAS? A quick recap. Meanwhile, I'm just setting it up, getting it ready. From all of you,
We learn about SAS, slicing the data, loading the data, and filtering the data as per our requirements.
Okay. Then we one of the classes you were not there. We have also looked into some of the common used stat function. So I think some others can also talk about. Hello. I'm not getting any response from. I can say Shilpi is also online. Bobita is also online. So today we are going to actually learn a very interesting concept. We are going to learn about macro. So Achal is going to join or she is not joining today?
So उसको fever है.
Oh, okay. But nonetheless, I understand this. Even I am also not very feeling well because of this weather and sickness. But hopefully, so regarding this, today and tomorrow we are covered about standardized and macro. In a while, we'll understand what is macro. For that, what I have already done, I have actually.
सर बहुत डिस्टरबेंस आ रहा है. आपकी वॉइस क्लियर नहीं आ रही है. काफी डिस्टरबेंस हो रहा है.
Is it better now? Is it better now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So when you're telling disturbances, what type of disturbances you're getting? Is it a snow sound? Because I am already using headphone.
No, sir. आपकी वॉइस थोड़ा ब्रेक हो रही थी. Now it's fine, sir.
Okay. So what we are going to learn? We are going to learn about macros. Macros are the efficient way of writing any program. So Mahendra, before this, you have heard this word macro somewhere?
Yes, in Excel.
Excel VBA, exactly. And there, you have used any macro, basic simple macro over there?
No, just recording a few activities and we can repeat these 2 days. Yes.
So that means from what you have learned from there, means what is the objective of using a macro?
To reduce the steps, we can do many things by using one command only.
Okay, so that is a good way of looking into macro. That means if there are some repetitive steps to program or write it very efficiently, we use macro. Or probably if any task is performed over a regular periodical basis, rather than writing that program again and again, what you can use macro. Correct? The interestingly, this word macro that came from basically the Greek word macro, which means servant. Okay, and that means you are actually creating some servants who can does things efficiently for you. So here, let us try to look in our today's and tomorrow's class, what are the macros, as macros we are going to learn, how we can do various automatic macro variables. So first, we'll understand what is a macro, the purpose of it. We have already understood a bit that if there is a repetitive task, you can use macro. Then we'll understand about various macro variables. There we'll understand about the global macro variables and local macro variables. We'll understand about automatic macro variables, processing macro variables, displaying macro variables using SAS log, using macro function in basically masking special characters, macro variable reference with text. There are multiple text function like lower function, upper function, what we have learned in our previous class, we'll be able to do using macro. And apart from it, we'll also understand about various defining and calling macro and macro parameters, creating macro variables and creating macro variables in SQL and iterative process. The SQL part probably we'll understand much more when we are doing our SQL programming. Then we'll see how we can also incorporate this macro and SQL together to write efficient programs. Probably you will see after using macro, a lot of our common SAS coding technique, what we have learned, it will be changed a bit. We'll be able to write it in a much more efficient way. There are, see, one program means any programming language you can write in multiple ways. So macro will introduce you to writing SAS programs in a much more efficient way. Now, about this class. In this class, what we are going to learn, we are going to learn macro variables, macro definitions, macro programs, as well as we are also going to learn this example macro programs. So for that, I have already shared two things with you in our common shared drive. One is a data set, another is I have shared two materials with you. Could you kindly download it quickly?
Yes, sir.
And let me also, because I was trying to download my SAS code file also, which has been disrupted because of this system. Again, I think I have to log in. So I will share this code also with you in a while. Right. Meanwhile, it is taking a time to open up. So let us go into the slides without wasting time. So purpose of macro. Macro is basically a text processing facility for automating and customizing the generation of SAS code, minimizing the amount of code that you must enter. That means what it is trying to tell in a nutshell or summary, you will be able to write your meaningful code in a much more shorter way using macro, and especially when it is repetitive in nature. The macro facility supports the following. One is symbolic substitution within SAS code, automated production of SAS code, conditional construction of SAS code, and dynamic generation of SAS code. And this is the last interesting one, which is now becoming very popular. Even if you go to the SAS proceedings of 2020, slowly and gradually, people are talking about if you can generate SAS code by writing SAS code. I will share some material on that. That is a bit advanced concept for you right now. But before we are through with SAS, I will share some. Please remind me. Writing SAS to generation SAS code to generate SAS codes. Okay, it is a dynamic generation of SAS code. If I fail to remember, please remind me. Okay.
Okay.
because it is the most modern concepts we are talking about. Now the SAS macro variables basically enable us to substitute text. That means the amount of code we enter into our SAS program. Macro variables can supply a variety of information, including operating system information. That means you will be able to get like in Excel, when we write equal to today, we get our date function, correct?
Yep.
Mahendra, similarly here also we can actually get various system related information, system date related informations using macro. Then we can also get SAS session information. We can optimize text strings by using SAS macro. The following sample codes is going to show you how we can actually do it. Like for example, you can see, and how we can invoke macro is basically writing this percentage. Like here, this percentage late year, that means we are defining the year as with this percentage late, and this percentage late is basically the macro, and then we are processing to it. And then you can see when you are actually, rather than writing here the year, what we are writing ampersand and year, then in this ampersand is basically going to call what? It's going to call this macro. So what will come? So in that case, when we print this particular data set, basically schedule product list for 2012, it will print you for that. Is it making sense?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the same example that is processing by saving the data, and there are some much more examples of basically macro reports where it is ampersand if system day, then if it is in Monday, then do. Then you can see here we are actually writing our else if and else if with macro, and we are actually creating a lot of macro in this case. Like we can see we are giving a macro to mention that this program is ending over here. So those things we will see in a while in a step-by-step broken manner when the code is up and running. Okay, just for a moment. So it is up. Great. Let me save this for you and share it with you. Hold on. So now this code is also available with you. I will request you to go and open it. Here I have actually made it available to make you understand.
Sir, which one? Sir, which one?
You can see there is a class 7.7 ampersand 8 SAS. So I told you to download all of these contents, correct? Because probably
Sir,
during
it is.
hello, you all are able to access. You all are
Yes,
able to
sir.
access
Now,
the.
yes, sir.
Okay. So now so we have already looked into the definition, but this is much more standard definitions we have created. So first, again, we have created our mylib for this, and then a definition of macro variable. A macro variable in SAS is basically a string variable. So what is a type of variable type of macro?
String
What is a
character.
type variable? It's a string character. Great. That allows us to dynamically modify a text in the SAS program through a symbolic substitution. How we can invoke a macro name? Basically, invoking the macro name comes with, first we put a percentage sign, then followed by the name of the macro. And at the same time, SAS has also made some of the macro available for us in the system, which are basically global macro. So whenever you initiate any SAS session, so you have available all of these macro sessions for your use. Similarly, we can also create local macros for particular program. So now we understand the concept of global and local macro. Global
Yes.
means that is available with SAS, and local means which we are going to write. For example, if we try to understand what are the type of macros available, so now this is also a macro, percentage put. Okay, but with this we are invoking automatic. That means what are the macros are already available for us, and we are checking that. Now you have already got the code, so we all can actually execute it together, so we can see the things and we will be able to talk. You have already got the code, everyone? Oh, I can see Achal has also arrived. So Achal, you have already got the code and you are getting the concept of macro. I do not know when you have joined.
So I just joined 5 minutes ago. I'm trying to understand. Actually, I'm just having fever. I try you, sir.
Okay, so I will just quickly just reiterate for you. A macro is basically a program which can help you to write your SAS program in a much more efficient way. And for that, to invoke a macro, we always use the percentage function. So in any of the SAS code, if you see, the code is starting with a percentage function and followed by any of the characters, string characters. That means it is a macro which is going to work into this context. Okay, just in a very nutshell and quickly.
Okay, sir.
So if you by now, if you just open up this file, please change your libname directory to your own libname directory. Okay. And let us run this code. See, once it is ran, you can see under your log files. So you can see all of these options. It has given so these are basically globally available macro which is available for your use. For example, if we see, if we call percentage seize date, what it will provide to you?
Current date, system date.
It will provide you the current system date. Absolutely. And if we provide system date 9, what it is going to provide to you?
To provide the system date in a format where it can contain the 9 characters for a space, like month,
So
int,
basically,
US, and FEB.
so it is so it is basically DD,
And
MMM,
Y
YYYY format. Okay. Similarly, sysday is going to print basically for what for you?
day,
Day
current
for
day.
you, current day for you. And some of the functions it's not actually going to show it to you, but some, because those will be require some more inputs, but you can see now. I think you have started making a sense out of it. So similarly, it has also started providing where we are doing it, like SaaS workspace server. Similarly, it's providing us basically what type of system we are using. Okay, it's also providing us the information about who is using this. So you are also getting your details in your system. It will be your system name. You are getting it.
Yes,
Similarly, what is this sysvar?
version.
So the version of what in this
Uh,
context?
SAS version.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. It's a SAS version. So now, so to extract the same information, we can do it in another way around. Probably we have to write much more larger number of codes, correct? But just using this percentage and sysvar, percentage and sysid, we can get all of this information much more quickly. So is it helpful or not?
Yes.
And now probably we'll see what are the real user of it. For example, now you can see we have got this sysgate, sysdate, and those informations. Now probably first I told you how to write a macro. Basically, first it is a percentage followed by late and followed by person. And now in person we are defining what we are defining. We are basically defining sysgate, and sysgate basically go to the system. It will get the user information and it will place over there. Now with put, we, if you are trying to identify, put is going to put that information back here. And here when we are getting the information, I have also told you how to retrieve the information of macro with ampersand and person. So right now, if you see, if you write here, you can see it's a stored macro variable by name person. You can see that, correct?
Yes.
Similarly, even if you try to see, instead of this, if you see, you can see all of these macro variables are available for you under sys.
Yes.
So now let's invoke it and let us print it. If we run this piece of code, it is going to provide us the information that user is. Make sense?
Yep.
Now let us see some example of sysdate. Okay, so in our SAS we have a built-in data by name in under SAS help by name cars, correct?
Yep.
So we are taking the data, and we have already understand about sysday. So sysday and sysdate, and so if we just invoke here, no, the Mahendra, it's not a question for you, it's question for probably Bobita or Shilpi. So if I try to print it, what will be the heading of this table?
Sales of says day and says date.
No, means sales.
So
No, it
basically
will not.
आज का दिन और आज की डेट एज ऑफ
Yes,
सिस्टम की जो डे है और सिस्टम का डेट जो भी है
yes.
Sir,
Absolutely.
particularly, yeah.
So in that case, see the ampersand sys day has generated this portion and sys date has generated this portion. And instead of it, if we just, as we have discussed, instead of it, if we write it as sys date 9, the same thing which we were discussing with Mahendra, 9 character format of DD MMM YYYY. Okay, we are good still now.
Yes, sir.
Now we are actually trying to create a small data. So it's basically a data, just dummy data, no data will be created here. Okay, first we are creating a data sets, and we are calling the data set, and we are actually, it's a blank data sets, and we are going to display the data set in percentage DSA. Okay, so what it provides us. So similar way, you can see, although it's it has not created any data set, but it is coming here and it is giving the percentage DSN as data. Now if we define our DSN, then it will be able to provide you the name of that macro like we are doing it before. So you have to always define a macro name to retrieve it. Until unless you define it, it will not be able to, just like that, it will not write a name for you. Okay, so to understand much more about it, probably let us go and try to create a data by orders. And from that order data has been created. You can see order data has been created. Now we want to print like above. We have talked about the title and all. So what shall we write? Now you will be able to, will you be able to tell me the date? Now you want to just print this table in a table format with current system date. What will be my code? What will be my code?
so title
We can go to title.
अगर इसे डेट प्रिंट करना है तो एम्परसेंड सिस डेट
So it has printed me as rightly Achal has said. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Now, earlier I have shown you a DSN. We have not defined the DSN here, but now let us take the DSN, that is a dataset name, as SAS help class and count of 5. And then if we are going to use here proc print data equals to ampersand DSN, so what this will invoke? No logic.
It will load the class dataset.
No, this will actually load the dataset. Okay. So okay, you are talking about class dataset. Yes, it will load the class dataset. This portion, absolutely correct. And then what this percentage?
5 observations.
So now if we print it, what it will print for us?
5 observations from class dataset.
Absolutely. So now earlier we used to write observations, and probably we in your analysis probably you are going to check observations. Earlier we should have been able to write coming here observation, changing the number. Rather than that, at the beginning of our code we can actually have a count defined, and we can always use that count. We can call it whenever we require it. Will that be helpful? Earlier we have used this printing and subsetting a small data sets out of it, but when we are actually creating, then we can actually create this structure, and whenever it is required we can use that. And similarly you can use DSN1, DSN2, and similar multiple macros you can create, which can, if you are merging the data, you do not have to write every time the SAS help dot class. Rather than that, you can actually invoke this, and your coding will reduce much more. You are agreeing on that point?
Yes.
Great. So on that understanding, let's move.
Oh, so sorry.
So I will.
Yeah.
Please ask. No
Actually,
problem.
मैं वो समझ नहीं पाई, आप प्लीज रिपीट कर देंगे?
Okay, sure. Absolutely, I will show. See, what is the macro is playing a role over here. For example, if you see, earlier we used to create observations and we used to put observation numbers here 10, 15 and all, correct? So similarly, at the beginning of the code, you can actually write this count, and next time whenever you are invoking, probably you are trying to look into head, tail, in between some count of 10, count of 15. In that case, you can just, rather than going and changing here in the within the code, you can go into your beginning where you have defined your macro. You can change it over there, and you can automatically get the result according to it. Similarly, when you are defining the dataset names, every time rather than writing live lib name followed by the data name, you can actually define a very multiple macro names like DSN1, 2, 3, 4, and you can start using them within your code. So rather than writing the entire SAS dot class, here just writing ampersand DSN is going to reduce your effort to write the code correctly. Got it, Anshul?
Yes, sir.
So let us go back to the slide and we'll come back again to coding. So now what we have seen, macro variables. Macro variables, what it does, it actually, it's a part of our SAS macro family, and macro variables are stored text, include complete or partial SAS text. We have seen that some of them are actually complete SAS text, some of them are partial SAS text. And there are two types of macro variables. One is the automatic macro variables, which are provided by SAS, which are, I have given another name to them. What is that name?
Global.
Global, absolutely. Yeah, and user defined macro variables whose value you can create and define. That will be not Mahendra, not
Local.
you. It will be local. So now you are also understanding why this user defined and automatic, because automatic is something like wherever there is a SAS system, it will be always available. So that's why it's a global macro variable or automatic macro variable. Okay. So let's proceed further. For example, macro variables are stored in a memory called the global symbol table. When SAS is invoked, the global symbol table is created and initialized with automated macro variables. So you have seen that this, all of these contents we have seen with our example of, which example has shown us that this one, correct? When we have called for this automatic, it has provided us information about all of these automatic macro variables. We are good. Let's process. Then user defined macro variables can be added to the global symbol table also. Like in this particular case, you have seen it has been some macros has been created like office, date, and units, which is also printed along with the global symbol table. The macro variables in the global symbol table are global in scope, always available, have minimum length of 0 characters, null value, have a maximum length of 64K characters, stored in numeric token as text. Now, a quick question. Which of these statements correctly defines a SAS macro variable? Which statement is correct in the below context?
The second, a SAS macro variable is independent of SAS.
Second one, you're absolutely correct, because it is independent of SAS dataset and contains a text string. The value of a macro variable remains constant until you change. Great. Now, what is the answer of this? Which of the following statement about SAS macro variable is false?
Third one, the second, user defined macro.
No, I think this is answer is wrong.
So third one, na, I
थर्ड
think
वन आपने
will be
बताया
third
था
one.
ऑटोमेटिक वाला.
It will be third one. I think this is wrong. This answer is wrong. It will be third one, because there are two types. It's absolutely correct. Macro variable string is absolutely correct. Remains constant until you change it. This is also correct. So I think third one is wrong. This is wrong. Okay. So this is the answer. You are correct. Now we have already seen a macro variable is created with %lit keyword. Guys, can I just do one thing? I have I need to go for a bio break. So let me just quickly, I have one video to run for you regarding this macro. So I will just play for you, and I will just, it was open, it has been closed. Anybody has gone into these links which I have provided to you? SAS, these videos and SAS materials, you are looking into it.
सर प्लीज एक बार दोबारा शेयर कर देंगे.
Yeah, I will share with you. Just 1 minute. It was open, it has been closed up. Yes. So this is one of the very useful, this is SAS Global Forum papers you will get from this. This is their video portal. There are use case examples of everything. If you go here, there was a macro.
आपकी स्क्रीन फ्रीज है, I think.
Oh, okay. Today there are a lot of different challenges we are facing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deanna Schreiber-Gregory, and my presentation is on a doctor's dilemma, how propensity scores can help control for selection bias in medical education.
This is the one which I was talking about.
Hi,
So
I'm Josh Horstman, and today we're going to talk about SAS macro variable lists. Originally, this was supposed to be a hands-on workshop to be presented at the SAS Global Forum 2020 conference.
so is it audible? Is it audible? I'm just sharing the link
Yes.
also with you.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
it's audible.
Yes, sir.
Just listen to his concept for 5 minutes.
In Washington, D.C. Sadly, the conference had to be canceled, and so we weren't able to meet there
Just
together.
let me
But
buffer it for you a bit.
this will allow us to build programs that are more dynamic. In other words, they adapt and respond based on the data. Their logic is driven by that data as opposed to having a bunch of things hard-coded. And so we eliminate these hard-coded data dependencies, which means we don't have to change our program every time our data changes. That saves us work and it makes our code easier to reuse and more flexible. It also lets us include lots and lots of ampersands in our code so we can confuse our coworkers and make sure they'll have to keep us around for years to come in order to maintain this code. Just kidding about that last part. Here's a little outline of what we're going to go through today. First of all, we'll do a little short review of the macro language. Now, I'm going to assume that you are familiar with the macro language, at least how it works on a fundamental level. If you're completely new to the macro language, you probably would want to go learn a little bit more about that before you proceed with this lesson, because we're going to assume that you know some of that. So go watch some other videos. There's plenty out there on YouTube or on SAS support channels, or get Art Carpenter's excellent book on the macro language and find out all about it. But we'll cover the basics just to refresh your memory in case it's been a little while. Then we'll talk about creating macro variable lists, and specifically, we'll talk about how to create them using proc-SQL, and we'll talk about how to create them using a data step. Two different methods with the same outcome, and we'll talk about why you might want to use one or the other in a certain situation. And then we'll talk about actually using these macro variable lists to do something useful. And as you can see, we'll go through 8 exercises over the course of these topics. With that, let's dig into our macro language review. We'll start by talking about how macro processing works. What happens when you submit some SAS code? Well, the first thing that happens is the code is scanned by the word scanner and parsed into tokens. Tokens simply means little bits and pieces of SAS language, the various language elements, the bits of syntax, such as variable names or keywords or operators, things like that. Those are tokens. And then those tokens are sent to the compiler for syntax checking to make sure that the tokens that you've put together and the order in which you put them together constitute valid SAS syntax. And only once that has been checked is that SAS code executed. Now, when the word scanner detects a macro trigger, something different has to happen. Macro triggers typically start with a % sign or an ampersand. Not every % sign or ampersand is a macro trigger. Sometimes those have other meanings in SAS, but most macro language triggers do start with those characters. So when we find one of those macro triggers, the word scanner routes those elements to the macro processor. So this is a bit of an intervention. Before SAS gets the code to execute, the macro processor steps in to do some stuff. Specifically, it resolves macro variables that you may have referenced in your code, and it executes macro statements. Those are things like %if or %do or %let. And once it finishes with that processing, some output results from that, and that output has to be rescanned. Whatever is produced by the macro processor is rescanned to see if there are additional macro language triggers in it, and additional processing is needed, because your macro code could generate more macro code, and we're going to see an example of that later in this talk. Here's a diagram that might be helpful for explaining this. Now, this diagram came from Art Carpenter's excellent book, Carpenter's Complete Guide to the SAS Macro Language, and I think it's pretty helpful. As you can see here, we submit our SAS code at the top left of the diagram, and this is sort of a flowchart representation. So we go down and say, does it contain macro references? That's the % and ampersand triggers. If it does, the macro facility is invoked. Macro references are resolved. So that could be references to macro variables or entire macros. And then macro statements are executed. And then that results in potentially some additional code. Now, what comes out of there may just be pure SAS code, because after all, the macro language is a SAS code generator. That's what it does, right? It generates SAS code. And if that's what it contains, then it won't have any more macro language references. So the answer to this question will be no. And then that step, meaning the data step or proc that we just submitted, will be compiled, parsed, and executed in the normal way.
So you have understood it? Was it too fast? Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
So what are the things you have understood from this till now?
Steps how microprocessor works.
Yes. You have also understood the importance of macro. You have also understood the same thing which I have also called about. We have already talked about in our class. That is how we are creating macro with percentage and how we are invoking with ampersand. All these concepts you have talked about. But there are a lot to it. It's a 1.5 hour video. I don't want to play the video continuously. Rather, we'll go with the class, and sometimes we'll see the video if it is necessary. Else, what I will recommend to you, this is a video. Probably you can also see end to end at home. It will be very, very helpful. You have got the link, correct?
Yes.
In the chat. Now, creating and referencing to macro variables. So now this slide, I think you will be able to understand much more quickly. So if we are creating macro variable, we are using with %let keyword. For example, if we type %let shift via, so what will be this this macro will produce to us? If we write ampersand shift via, what it will invoke to us, what the result it will provide to us?
Speedy Express.
Speedy Express, absolutely. Similarly, the order date also, it will provide as the order date. And similarly, this year example we have already discussed about. So when we are invoking it, it will invoke the year for us. Now coming to a quick MCQ. So out of this, which one is having proper referencing to the sys date? There are two programs, 1 and 2. Which one will call basically the sys date properly?
So the first one.
First, correct. Now coming into using the automatic macro variables. The automatic macro or the global macro variables are created when the SAS is invoked. That means we are initiating the SAS session itself. They are global. That means always available, usually assigned by values by SAS, and can be assigned values by the user in some common cases. We can actually change those. Some automatic macro variables have fixed values that are set when SAS is invoked. Like for example, the sys date. Correct. It is coming from your system. Similarly, sys user ID. It's also coming from your system ID. So those are actually fixed values. Like for example, SAS version macro. It is always fixed. Correct. You're getting the concept of fixed macros.
Yep.
So again, the same example it is talking over here, where the sys date is basically the date of SAS invocation, and it comes into a date 7 dot format. Sys date 9 we have already discussed, date 9 format. Sys day is the day of the week when we are actually running the SAS. Sys time is the time of SAS invocation. Then sys nv is basically for, that is iterative execution or back. It is basically batch execution that it will provide those info. Similarly, sys scp is abbreviation of what type of operating system is getting used. Sys var is the release of the SAS that is being used. We have already looked into 9.4. SAS job ID is basically how many current SAS sessions for the current batch job it is going on. Those informations it will provide to you. Now we can also substitute information such as time, date, and day in your SAS session and the version of SAS you're running, footnotes for a report. For example, custom. Okay. Now it has actually created a graphic output for you, and you can see all of these details it is captured for. Now, example of some user defined macro statement, the percentage lead statement. The simplest way to define your own macro variable is to use a percentage lead statement. The percentage lead statement enables you to define a macro variable and assign a value to it. For example, percentage lead variable equal to value. So here you are going to write the variable name, and then you are going to define a value to it. A variable is any name that follows a SAS naming convention. Value can be any string from 0 to 65k characters. If either variable or value contains a reference to another macro variable, such as msvar, the reference is evaluated before assigning the made. If the variables already existed, the value replaces the current value. To create a macro variable, name time and assign the value of afternoon, we could actually write it like something like this. So now this has been stored. How we can invoke it? Tell me how we can invoke that time.
Systime, using systime.
No, it will not be ampersand, then time. It's a we are not going. It's a local macro we are talking about. Correct. We have created it now.
Okay, we are creating a new. Okay.
Okay. So it has not been created because the title is ambiguous. That is the reason. But if we just we can see this has been created in a proper statement, we can actually use it. Now if you see ampersand and time, this is a macro which is available. Okay. This is stored. So when we use the percentage LET statement to define a macro variable, we should keep in mind the following rules. All values are stored as character strings. Mathematical expressions are not evaluated. The case of the value is preserved. That means if you're writing time, T capital I time, then in that case we have to call like this. The case of the value is preserved. Like if it is basically afternoon in all small case, the same way it will be reproduced. The question mark that encloses that literals are stored in a part of the value. Leading and trailing blanks are removed from the value before assigning the value. That means in this case, if it is coming something like this, after afternoon there is a space, it will actually store it as afternoon only. And some of the examples of local variables, like you can see percentage late name equal to Ed Norton. So if you write this macro, then in that case if you recall ampersand and name, it will basically provide the Ed Norton. Similarly, if you are writing in this format, it will actually come like Ed space Norton, and If you are writing it in this format, it will come as John's report, where you can see the same title case has been preserved. Start, let's start, but we have not defined let total 0, then in that case it will come as a total 0 for you. However, we have talked about this is not a mathematical operation. So let's sum 4 plus 3. So in that case, the variable name will be created sum, but it will not return 7 to you. It will basically return 4 plus 3 to you. Got it? Similarly, if we have created earlier, we have created this. So let's probably create this and then you'll be able to understand. So now if you write percent and start, you can see it is available for you. Correct? Similarly, first let us write this, then let's write this. So if you run this, you can see the total is available. But for total, it is going to be basically 0 and plus 3 plus 4 because of this. However, it is not going to provide you the answer of 7. Similarly, we can actually create the var list. We can create even name, age, height as basically var list also. So hope we are clear on this part.
सर ये W7 कैसे देगा वर्क?
Pardon me?
ये तो जितना भी है स्टेटमेंट रिफ्लेक्ट कर रहा है, मीन्स अगर इसका जो सम है 4 + 3 7, ये कैसे रिफ्लेक्ट करेगा?
7 reflect नहीं करेगा यहाँ पे. And I have told you the reason. So anybody in the class got the concept why it will not show 7?
क्योंकि हमेशा स्ट्रिंग में परफॉर्म करता है.
So basically these all are string. These all are characters. So you cannot do perform a sum expression on a character. Correct? Got it?
आई एम आस्किंग कि हाउ इट विल बी, मतलब अगर इसका टोटल करना है तो मीन्स इस पूरे फॉर्मेट का मतलब ही क्या है?
That will not be through macro. That will be through other
It's
process.
just to count the length only, length and the variable.
Yes. Okay. So on that note, let's come here. Let's do quick some MCQ of our understanding check. So which of the following statement can create a macro variable named that has got a value of 23?
So third one.
Third one, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Why not fourth one?
डबल स्ट्रिंग सर अगर हम कोटेशन पे लिखेंगे तो तभी 23 आएगा ना.
Because if you actually take the fourth one, it will also print the inverted commas. So third one is the correct.
23.
I'm just
Yes.
it will also print the inverted commas in that context. Good, right? Now you tell me.
लेकिन
Everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now you are getting it, getting much more clearly the concept of macro.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now let us look into processing macro variables. So basically, the processing macro variables, how it works, it could be either you are submitting a command, you are compiling a command, or you are going for a batch process. In that context, the macro will basically play a role. I think this is the same concept which even the video was trying to concept, is where it will play a role. It will play a role in the data step, or it will play a role into the proc step, both. Okay. So in on the SAS code in the input stack, it reads the text in the input stack left to right, top to bottom. It route text to the appropriate compiler on demand, and then it suspends the activity when the step boundary such as run statement has reached. We have seen SAS will start from our programming till now. We have always seen any SAS program, it start reading basically first left to right, then it goes to the next line, left to right, then it goes to the next line, then left to right, and when it actually hits a run or quit, basically it stops the compilation, correct? And in between, if we actually miss any of the SAS defined requirements like semicolon, we actually end up into compilation error, correct? Agreed from our understanding?
Yes, sir.
Now, in basically what it also does, it does something that is known as tokenization. So what is tokenization? Between the input stack and compiler, SAS programs are tokenized into smaller pieces. The component of SAS known as the word scanner that divides the program text into fundamental units called tokens. We have seen those tokens when we start writing program, it start highlighting into different colors, correct? Like proc, print, data, next. If you are talking about any variable, then end. Or probably if it is a data new, then set, then we are actually talking about various variables, and then it goes into the end, correct? So these tokens are passed on demand to the compiler. The compiler requests tokens until it receives a semicolon. So that is the reason, as we miss semicolon, it actually violates the tokenization rule. So it actually end up into an error. The compiler performs a syntax check in the statement. The SAS stops sending statements to the compiler when it reaches a step boundary of beginning of a new data or proc step. Because we always know SAS has got two class of steps. Either it is a proc step or it's a data step. Agreed? Understood the concept of tokenization? Hello?
Yes.
Question for? I think somebody is checking mic. So any question for me?
No, sir.
So now coming into this, the tokens could be of various types. It could be a literal token, it could be a number token, it could be a name token, or it could be a special token. A literal token is basically a string character that treated as unit. The string is enclosed in either single or double quotes, like any text or any text. Similarly, a number token is basically a number numerical input that is going with a e notations of real numbers. It could be date constants, time constants, date or time constants, and hexadecimal constants are also number tokens. Like for our example, all the normal numerical characters, time date formats are basically number tokens. And a name token is something like what we have seen. A name token is a string of characters that begins with a letter to underscore and continues with underscores, letters or digits. Like a period can sometimes be a part of a name. For example, in file n equal to item 3 univariate then dollar. Similarly, we can also use some of the special tokens in this context, like we have seen, which actually also read by SAS. Like for our commenting purpose, we use star, then backslash, plus, double star, dollar format, as well as ampersand format, or probably ampersand format to get a result of a macro, and dollar form percentage format to create a macro structure. A token that ends when the word scanner detects a beginning of another token or a blank after a token. The maximum length of any token is basically 32K characters. For example, this var x1 x0z is an example of 6 tokens. Similarly, title reports for May, this actually has got 3 tokens, like report for May. Got it? So there are how many tokens are into this statement now?
सर बैक पीछे वाली स्लाइड लेके आना, मुझे समझ में नहीं आया कि मैं 6 टोकन
यहाँ पे कितना टोकन्स है?
यस सर, बट और 6 टोकन कैसे आए?
1 2 3 4 5 6, because in between there is a blank also, correct?
Okay.
Got?
Yes sir.
Like 1 2 3.
सर बट नीचे वाले में 3 टोकन है, टाइटल वाले में एक वर्ड को एक टोकन कंसीडर करेंगे अगर हम स्टेटमेंट लिखेंगे तो?
Yes.
सर इवन जो फर्स्ट एग्जांपल है इसमें 6 टोकन्स कैसे काउंट करा है उसने? x1 को सिंगल लिया है।
1 2 3।
तो देन x10 को सिंगल कंसीडर क्यों नहीं किया सर? उसको 2 पार्ट्स में क्यों किया?
So I am not considering 2. var is 1, x1 is 1, dash is 1, 2, that become 3. Okay, x10 is 1, then there is a space, and then there is a z. So there are
okay, including that. Okay sir, yes.
That's why I told there is a space. If there is
yes
no
sir, yes sir, okay. I was thinking that you were saying that x1 से consider हो रहा है, तो okay sir, I got it.
Like if we go back and understand this again, see, it is actually talking about a literal token could be any text or any text, either single or double quotation. Okay, similarly this could be one number 23, one number, one token, and if it is coming like this, probably it will be a one token. Okay, now tell me how many tokens are there into this statement. Count it. Also understand, we have talked about this as tokens, correct? So I'm just giving a hint to you, like dollar, ampersand, and
13.
There are 13 tokens. Now there are how many tokens are there into this statement?
So 11 13। सर अगर बीच में स्पेस भी नहीं होगा तो तब भी काउंट करेंगे? मैंने इसको 30 जून 2002 तो पूरा एक ही काउंट कर लिया था।
मैंने भी सेम।
ओके, समझ में आ गया, बट अगर नंबर है, अच्छा आपने
एक बार इसका काउंट बताइएगा प्लीज, कैसे हुआ है?
You tell me, means who has got the logic? Else I will tell.
प्लॉट के बाद देखो स्पेस भी है तो फिर देन डेट है फिर देन स्ट्रिंग सॉरी नीचे मल्टीप्लिकेशन का साइन है रेवेन्यू इज इक्वल टू एंड जो डॉलर की वो जो है ना इन्वर्टेड कॉमा है उसको भी वो इंडिविजुअल काउंट कर
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We are all are good into the concept of tokens. Shall we move into macro triggers, or you have any more questions remaining here? Okay, so why we have actually learned about tokens, you will come to know now. So probably you are getting confused in tokens, but now you try to understand, it will be very easy for you. Basically the word scanner recognize the following token sequences as macro triggers, like the percentage followed by immediately by a name token such as percentage late, or probably ampersand followed immediately by a name token such as amount or sys date. It is actually recognized by SAS system. So when a macro trigger is detected, the word scanner passes it to the macro processor for evaluation. The macro processor examines these tokens, requests additional tokens as necessary, performs the actions that is indicated. So that is the reason we have to be cognizant about how we are going to invoke these tokens, because the SAS as a system need to scan and understand the tokens. Got it? Clear still now?
Yes, sir.
For macro variable, the processor does one of the following. It creates a macro variable in the symbol table and assigns a value to the variable. We have seen that, correct? When we are actually running, means we have seen in our examples, when we are probably for example this one, what we are doing here, we are actually creating a macro variable, correct? And then we are actually assigning the values in this person for which we are actually assigning these values. That is the reason when we are actually invoking it, it is providing us this answer. Got it? Now let us quickly go back into the video. The guy, what he is trying.
However, if that text that came out of the macro processor has additional macro references in it, then this loop must repeat until we're left with nothing but pure text. Now, as far as the macro processor will complain about that, but the macro processor won't. Can help us avoid some problems that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Let's talk about creating macro variables using the %let macro statement. As most of you probably know, we can create a macro variable by simply saying %let the name of the macro variable that we wish to create equals, and then the value we wish to assign to that macro variable. And when this statement is executed by the macro processor, it will take that value and store it on the symbol table. The symbol table is where macro variables are stored. So this statement here will create a macro variable called output_path. and it will store the value C:\temp in that macro variable. Later, we can refer to that macro variable using the ampersand notation. So for example, here we have a file name statement. File name, my file, and then in quotes, where we normally would have a complete path and file name, we have a macro variable reference. We have ampersand output_path \myfile.txt. When this statement is submitted, the macro processor, well, the word scanner will notice that there's a macro trigger in here. And the macro processor will then kick in and resolve this macro variable reference. So the macro processor, it doesn't care about file name, my file, those just pass on through, but then it sees ampersand output_path and says, that's a macro variable reference. I need to go check the symbol table, find out what value that macro variable has, and replace that reference with that value from the symbol table. So it goes to the symbol table and finds C:\temp, and that value is placed into the input buffer instead of ampersand output_path. So now we have file name, my file, and then C:\temp \myfile.txt. That is what actually gets passed on down to SAS for execution. The macro processor stepped in, did its job of replacing the macro variable reference with ordinary text, and then finding no more macro variable references, it sent what was left down to SAS for execution. Now, there's a problem that we have to talk about that we can come across when we're using %let. And this has to do with the timing that we discussed a minute ago. %let is a statement that's executed by the macro processor. That means that it executes before SAS compiles and executes the SAS code. So let's look at this data step here. We have data null set SAS_help.class. Now, that's one of the built-in data sets that comes with SAS. There's a whole library called SAS help. SAS_help.class has 19 records with information about the kids in a grade school classroom. And one of those kids' names is Alfred, and we've said where name equals Alfred, so this is only going to read in one record. So we read in the one record where name is Alfred, and now we have %let, and we attempt to create a macro variable called Alfred_age. %let Alfred_age equals age. Age is the name of one of the variables in the SAS_help.class data set. So we read in one record, and then we attempt to take the value of the variable age and assign it to a macro variable called Alfred_age. That should work, right? Well, this is not going to come out the way we were hoping. Here's what happens. When we submit this code, it goes to the macro processor first. The macro processor sees all of this text, data null, set, SAS_help.class, blah, 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 blah. It just passes that on through until it gets to %let. There's a macro language trigger. %let Alfred_age equals age. And it literally assigns the letters AGE, that string, to a macro variable called Alfred_age. Right? It doesn't see that as a variable name because at this point in time, the data set hasn't even started executing yet. At this point in time, we're still just in the macro processing loop, that loop at the top of the diagram that we showed a few slides ago. And so it replaces, it assigns that macro variable, and then it gets to run and then sends all the rest of this code down to SAS. And all the SAS compiler sees is data_null_ set SAS_help.class where name equals Alfred. Run. That's it. So the macro variable is going to.
So now you have got the concept which I was trying to tell, how SAS reads the tokens and how it assigns the macro and where it will work and where it will not work. Got it?
Yep. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So we will see some more interesting cases where it will work and where it will actually encounter some of the problems. So you are liking the format? So hope it is fine. Means I'm going into three things: my code, slide, and video. So hope it is fine with you, correct? Means Any problem? Anybody is facing any problem with the format, or shall I stick to one? Is there any suggestion? Hello.
No, so I think I'm comfortable.
Okay. Because this concept of macro has actually, there are in SAS there are multiple huge number of macros that is there. So just to cover it in 2 days, so it is a very short time. So I'm trying to provide as much of as information to you. At the same time, I have also provided some materials. I will recommend you to go through it. But nonetheless, let's go into it. So now we have also understood about the concept of word scanners. Let us go into the next concept. So this is the same example which he was also talking over here, how it reads and how it provides. So now, so from our understanding, what is the macro processor responsible for processing? Is it, what will be the answer? What will be the answer to this? Hello.
Micro language elements.
So from Babita, it is micro, all micro language elements. Okay. Any other answers?
Yes, for me also third.
Perfect. So now displaying macro variable values in the SAS log. We have seen some of the example, but we'll try to also understand. So displaying macro variables in the SAS log, that is, there is a symbol gen options where we can actually write this option statement with symbol gen, where this no symbol gen specifies the log messages about macro variables references will not be displayed. This is the default. However, symbol gen specifies the log messages about a macro variable which will be displayed. For example, another way of verifying the values of macro variable is to write your own message to the SAS log. That is a percentage put statement, writes text to the SAS log. For example, basic percentage put statement is going to be the percentage put followed by the name of that particular text. Either it is all, or it's automatic, or it is basically user. Like we have already created here automatic. So let us see, go into the slab, to go into the code and see with user what are the things. Now we can see these are the user based details are available. Currently it is only showing the global options. As we go on and create macros, we'll see some more examples. This is the machine details. SAS help class is a dataset name as we have defined it. Person is basically who is working this system where we are working. 0. Okay, got the concept? Or similarly, you can also write all. It's automatic, it's global. Now, using macro functions to mask special characters. Now for that, let us look into this. This is basically one of the data where there are, this is the variable text example, and var2 is equal to text, and we are running it. So in this context, basically var is stored as a 4-byte variable that has the value as text. If the text were not enclosed in the quotation mark, it could be treated as a variable name. The var2 is stored basically in this context as a 7-byte variable that has got a value. Okay, now if we go and do a proc print here and name this report, we can see the outer quotation mark that causes an unmatched single quotation mark within the text to be interpreted as an apostrophe that is a part of the title case. So in this particular case, it is actually mentioning to it that this John's report is the name of the title. However, this in between apostrophe is basically within the part of the text. Now, in this type of context, what we can do, we can use this macro option, the symbol gen. Now, suppose you want to store one or more such statements in a macro variable. For example, you want to create a macro variable where you have named a program data with x equals to 1, run, stored as its value. You can use this type of options. For example, I'm showing you this example, the log of it.
So, hello. सर
Yes.
आपकी स्क्रीन फ्रीज हो गई है.
Oh, so what is visible still now?
So just वो
Means what?
स्लाइड हो रही है.
Oh,
जो आपने अभी
just hold on. Thank you for it. Now it is visible.
no sir.
Visible to everybody. The code, is it a code window is visible to everybody?
Yes sir, now
Yes,
it's
sir.
visible.
Okay, I think there was a network lag. So where were we? We were into the concept of the symbol chain. Now, if we see the for what the symbol chain purpose is used, it is fine. Let's go into the log and let us see, because it has not created the data, it has got no data informations, but the new data has been created. where we can see if we go into the log, we can see the macro variable resolves some character. Similarly, we can see this is actually going to work into this x equals to 1. This macro has been worked. This statement is not valid. And the data set has got one observation and 0 variable. That's why we cannot see this one. But it was actually able to store its value.
So एक क्वेश्चन था, आप प्लीज कोड पे जाएंगे एक बारी.
Yes.
सर यहाँ पे जब हमने एम्परसेंड फ्रॉग यूज किया है तो फिर हमें क्या यहाँ पे कोड को नहीं सर, जस्ट नेक्स्ट लाइन हमने यहाँ पे सेमीकोलन किया है. सो
You're talking about this one, correct, frog?
यस यस सर, हमने यहाँ पे सेमीकोलन यूज नहीं किया है. सो ये तो एरर तो देना चाहिए ना इसे.
So you're talking about if I just put this put.
नो सर, कोड के एंड में हम जैसे सेमीकोलन यूज करते हैं ना, मैं उसकी बात कर रही हूँ.
सर प्रिंट के बाद हमने सेमीकोलन यूज किया ना, तो हमने उसके बाद नहीं किया था.
अच्छा. Oh, I think this is the whole statement. So
Okay.
you're telling this. No, this is
Sir.
the error is not because of that. Error is because of that because there is no data. It has created the data set. You can see if you go over here, it has created the data set, but it is not having the dimension. It has created the data new. Okay, but it is not having dimension. That's why it is not. It's throwing an error.
Okay, sir.
So it will not be this. But I was thinking that you are talking about here to write. Put. That will also not work.
So वो तो फिर भी एरर थ्रो
Anyway.
करेगा कि ब्लैंक डेटा है, तो वो बताएगा.
So this is just for example to show that this work into this type of context of symbol gen. I will show you some better example of symbol gen also. This example, just for our, let us go for our understanding that actually using this we have able to store the value of x1, where we have actually able to create a macro by name program as a data new, and then we are able to invoke it using the program. But we'll see some better good examples of symbol gen. Okay. Now coming into this next one, that is percentage str argument. This percentage str argument is basically a combination of text and macro triggers. The str function hides the normal meaning of semicolon and other special tokens and m numeric equivalence of comparison or logical operator so that they appears as a constant text. It enables macro triggers to work normally. It preserves leading and trailing blank places in the argument. Special tokens and mnemonic equivalence include semicolon, class, star, blank, or probably LT, ET, GQ, and or these things are also considered in this case. So one of the examples of this, you can see there are a number of ways we can write this. Method 1, you can put all the text, like let program the same one, structure, then data new, then x1, and then run. That means let's run and see that. again it has created the data, but in this case it has not given the errors in this concept. However, we can also write this thing in a separate way. So what we are doing it, in this case you can see here we are calling the structure before and data new to everything after, but here data new and then structure we are just placing semicolon, and then again after structure we are placing semicolon, and this will also work. Similarly, if you are writing like this, so what we are doing in method 3, we can also create some additional macro variable, assign a coded value to it, and then reference it to the additional statement for a program variable that we have also done earlier in the sysdate scenario, where we have created 2 macros. So for example, you can see this is one macro for S. Similarly, for structure, we are using semicolon, then let program data, and then here we are calling this whole variable. So basically it is going to come as a semicolon, and then it basically going to go as this. So this is also working. Now we can see if we come and run this, we'll be able to you can see this S variable is also getting saved here. Got it? So this is basically about the structure, because structure argument can handle either mnemonic values, or it means if you are going to put or create a macro of blank, semicolon, special characters, then in that case you should use the structure argument or the structure functions. So we are good with structure function. Now with this example, so this is another
Yes.
example of symbol gen. So for there is a SAS user, there is a course data which it is going to use. The data was not available, but still it is not showing. Title is not printing.
Double inverted comma.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, there were a small issue with the prob that the data was not available. Then there was some structural fault. So now I think this will work. Hold on for a moment. This is going to work now.
So the title क्यों नहीं आ रहा?
It came now. It also has taken some warning. Let me just try to. One thing is because it is here, it cannot be saved like this because it has to be under a quote because it's a string. Then hold on. Is there any additional space? Problem. Why it is taking run also? Now it is printing, but it is still printing in an incomplete way. This should only be Jones report, not all these options. Probably I will check this part. This. Option symbol in, test, Jones report. Jones report could be under this block print data for the mylib orders. There is this data also, mylib orders. Let's see what warning it is giving. Coded text. Okay.
Spelling गलत लिख दिया आपने.
Oh, sorry. That is still why this is coming. It should print like report name Jones report. That's it. But it is printing. Let's run.
सर एक बार कोट वाली लाइन
Because
दिखाना जो एक्चुअल हमने स्लाइड पे.
This data itself is not there. SAS uses courses. So I have just taken another data example.
ऐसा
But that A title should come.
सर हमने जोन्स रिपोर्ट जो है वो इन्वर्टेड कॉमा में लिखा है ना उधर.
Otherwise, means I can show you another example why it will not come properly with this. Okay.
कलरफुल
Now
आ
you
रहा है
can
और
see.
आधा हाफ कलरफुल आ रहा है एंड हाफ गलत डॉट पे आ रहा है.
So it is not able to understand it. So now if we just make it under a single code, then also it will give a conflict because there is a Jones. So that is the same thing I have done first.
सर बट ऐसे
This
तो
will-
टेक्स्ट भी नहीं रीड कर पा रहा क्योंकि टेक्स्ट भी तो उसमें आ रहा है.
Uska reason that system is getting confused is because of this apostrophe in between. So you can see it is now actually saving John, and this part will give an error. But if we put it under double inverted comma, okay,
Yes, sir. Then तभी सिस्टम रीड कर रहा है sir.
and test this. Now it will actually see it's responding, it's returning. But if you are making it like this, Babita, to your question, okay,
Yes, sir.
now you will see what will happen. We'll see all the scenarios quickly. Okay, now if you see, run this, it has not given any, you can see it has not given output. Got it? It is given, so it has actually stopped getting, see,
Yes, sir.
now if you see the other one, probably if we just make it like this, and if we just run this, it's also not giving the output. Got it?
Yes, sir.
So we are good, and you can
Yes,
see
sir.
because of that all the codes after also it's getting deactivated, because SAS, we have actually talked about how SAS reads the codes, correct? So when it is going to get reading the code left to right and top to bottom, you can see below all the codes are also till this part is getting deactivated, will not work. So now we are good, but still there is a problem, it is persisting. I do not know why it is instead of showing the name, it is giving me all this, or this is good up to this part, but why it is giving all this part, I need to check it. Okay,
तो यार यहाँ पे टाइटल में ना जॉन को जॉन जॉन्स ऐसा टॉपिक एस लिखा हुआ है, वहां पे वो जॉन्स कर दे रहा है, मतलब बहुत सारे जॉन वाला।
जॉन्स को क्या कर रहे हैं? जॉन्स। ओके, दैट
ऐसा
इज द
टॉपिक
थिंग
ऐसे
आई हैव
हटा
नॉट।
दे रहा है, रिप्लेस कर रहा है। ये सर।
So that's why I will just exactly. If you are talking about apostrophe s, yes, it's not showing the apostrophe s also. Just let me see, is it coming because
अब आ गया सर। ये ऐसा टॉपिक इसके उससे ना रीड ही नहीं कर पा रहा अच्छे से इसको।
but यहाँ पे भी एक कहानी आ रहा है. There is a story is coming here. You can see this last part. They should not be
सर
there
हमने
also.
अगर इनको हटा दें यहाँ से, जो ऊपर पे हमने वो लगा रखे हैं, ऐसा टॉपिक लगा रखे हैं।
हाँ, you are talking about these all.
सर यस सर, जॉन्स रिपोर्ट को हमने इन्वर्टेड कॉमा के अंदर रखा हुआ है ना। अब इसको हटा के हम कर सकते हैं आई थिंक।
No, no.
नहीं।
Now it will give you John report. You can see John report.
Yes, sir.
But if it is a inverted comma, in that case you have to keep it under double inverted comma and write. So that's why I need to check this.
Okay.
Why this is coming. Okay, so let's come back to our class. So see, for this we can actually write it in this way. Like we have understood about structure format, correct? We can actually write in this.
इससे आ रहा है।
So now by using the structure format, we'll be able to get it. But without that also, in this way, the way I have written should have got, but I do not know. I need to check that. So now you understand how structure format can help us.
Yes, sir.
And there are some more examples of structure. Is basically there are in our structure function, which could hide the normal meaning of an ampersand percentage. And inner structure stands for no resolution. It has the same syntax as percentage structure. For example, percentage late period, then structure is basically May and June. Then we can actually write like inner structure May and June, and we can actually we get period result to this. Like, so these are about structure and inner structure. Similarly, macro variable references with text. Then macro variable in text we can use in various ways. We can reference macro variables anywhere in our program for special situations, like macro variable references adjacent to leading or trailing text. We can use text and ampersand variable. Then, or we can also write it like ampersand variable text or text ampersand variable text, like that also. And then adjacent macro variable references we can write as ampersand variable and ampersand variable. Let us try to see the example of it. Like we have this order data. We have created the order data. It's not having any date. Then is this is having date? Yes. So let's take our this data says order fact dot sas, which I have actually shared with you in under data sets. Let's load that data and let us do it on this. So what is the component of order data? Okay, it is here. Let me load on that data. It is having order by quantity
सर कार डेटा हमारा सिर्फ यूजर में था।
It was in SAS help also. Cars. Okay, it was cars. Okay, let me just paste it. Okay, now we'll do H. Bar. Okay. Now in this case, I think I have some examples of car data. Just let me. These are simple examples. This you have already seen. I'm not able to get this. And probably this one also I need to see. Probably let me take here, in this case, wait. Okay, probably I will look into it, and tomorrow's class I will provide you answer to you why it is happening. Now we have already looked into these examples. Similarly, let me show you some more examples. So I think which you will be able to quickly relate. So this is the orders data. Now if we are on that, if we are going to print, which you have already seen, it's going to print the results of the date. Similarly, we have already looked into all of these examples. Now the same car data, if you are trying to print a report with, we have saved here the make name as Audi and type name as sports. Okay, so now if you are just going to print only the data of Audi and sports type Audi car, we can actually print the data selectively, where make is equal to make name, which is defined as Audi, and type is basically the sports car. It will just print the same data component from for you. Now you can see the example. It has just taken out from the entire data where the make is basically Audi, and it has taken the type as equal to sports. And similarly, an example of basically where even in the video he was actually talking about where it will not run percentage late in a data step. Like for in this example, if you see to work on the data, and if we run this, this will not be able to retrieve, this macro will not be able to retrieve the result for you. Similarly, now going into creating a macro program where there will be multiple parameters, where we can see where we are actually creating a percentage by macro where it shows make and type both together, and we are going to print the cells. It will provide the same example answer like previous. When you try to show the results by another macro, You can see it will show the results of BMW. So there are multiple ways to create these macros. You have got this example, Audi. Anybody, any confusion? Hello.
No, sir.
So similar way, you can actually create some multiple parameter values. So you can see here, we are writing the macros in this way, where we are writing writing macro, we are writing multiple parameters. Like here, make is one parameter and type is one parameter. We are actually once we have created that, then we are actually going to provide some input values for those parameters. Like for make, we are providing BMW, and type we are going to provide SUV. Similar way, if you want the same examples like before, and same output, you can really go and make it E and sports. We have made Audi, and sports. It will provide the same output as previous. Got it? So we can write
Yes, sir.
our macros multiple ways. Either we can write it like this, or we can write it like this also. Okay, both will give the same result, exact same result. This context. Okay, let us see some more examples. Macro. For that, let us create this data set by name HSB2. So this is a data where there are numbers of observations around 18 with right, math, female, and SCOT. And now let us try to do some macro work on that. For that, before just a revisit, if we run this, what it will produce for me? If we run this, what it will produce for me? It was there in the past class. Shilpi, if we run this, what it will produce for me? Shilpi? Hello? Mahendra, if we run this, what it will produce for me?
It will produce data from 4 variables: right, map, female, and associative.
No, means I am writing proc means. What proc means does?
Summary of the
We
data.
have looked it. It provides a statistical summary of the data, correct? Mean, standard deviation, minimum and maximum. Okay. Now, using the same data, let me write a small regression model. So for that, we are actually, I think Mahendra has missed this part. So I think Bhavita, Achal and Shilpi was there in that class. So we can invoke regression by writing proc range, which is a linear regression method. Okay. So you can see this is a linear regression method. So what is if we just run this, Bhavita, what will be the output and what is the model type we are trying to run?
I think
What is a
it will create model. It will create more
Categorical.
4 variables, a linear model.
Okay, so what is a dependent variable? What is the independent variable in this?
So
What is
independent
y?
is y is read, and x is right, map, female, and associative.
Okay, so it is just random model of linear. So we are running it. We are getting the result. This is basically just to show you the how we can also use utility. So it has just given us the statistical outputs. You have seen that it has given root mean square, r square, and blah blah blah, all our statistical parameters and residue and all these things. Now, just why I have shown it to you, let us try to do the same regression model using a macro. So where all these variables, let us define a name for that. So because that will prove the morning time means, sorry, beginning of the session, what I was trying to tell you, that how our code writing volume will come down. So all of our x's, let us define with inverse. We can do that. Correct? Now, if we go into the same proc means and in variation, here in the basically in the where we are actually writing all of these variables, let us just invoke it with ampersand inverse. It will produce the same result for us. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, similar way, when we are going to write our regression model, we can also invoke in a similar way. And we can run it. And we are going to get the same results. It is, so macro is helpful.
Yes.
It's based on
Yes,
how
sir.
you are actually using. So now, just for checking, put my first macro variable in where is basically the inverse. So if I print this, what it will produce? What will be the output of this? What will be the output of this in log? Guys, from our understanding, what a macro takes as an input? Text, correct? So in that case, what are the text it is going to be? It's going to be
Variable
my
name.
first macro that is right space math space females space is OCST, correct? Correct. This was just for quick understanding.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, I think this everybody will be able to answer this now. This was they're in the top because of writing code. It has come down. So let's go into so here what we are now trying to do, report formatting along with applying those macros. Now it will create today's date is this today and today is the day, and it is producing the result. Now let us go and create another data set. By name biomass data. Hope now we can understand all of these components while creating the dataset, correct? Anybody is having any questions on this till now? All the format, level, in format components. Then we are going to data lines. And our data has been created. Now, on that data, if you are trying to create a copy to work, done that also. Similarly, we can check the proc contents. What proc contents provide informations? Proc contents.
कंटेंट्स में सर समरी रहती है पर
You are correct. So what type of summary?
तो एक्चुअली उसमें सारा मतलब मीन मोड मीडियन भी रहता है 35
So it also
Remark
it
length
provide
वगैरह
your
भी रहती है
dataset sustainability information. इसमें statistical information नहीं रहता है, rather it is having all your data related information like length, characteristics, labels. So for that you have proc means. So that is a proc difference between proc contents and proc means. So if you are doing a stat analysis using SAT, you have to run both. Okay.
Yes, sir.
ये भूलना नहीं चाहिए. I might not mind if you forget some 2-3 macros, but for the data science related purposes, proc contents, proc means, all these things, please remember. Okay, now similar way we can actually print some of the observation, so which will show us the data. So this is basically a data which is showing about various variables and attributes and with along with date. Now let us try the same above example what we have done. First we have created a data sets. From there we have actually created a copy of that data sets into work. Now in our work also there is a copy of biomass. Okay, then we have done the contents check, and then we have done the count check. So the same thing if you are trying to do, I think the last one answer you will be able to tell now. How we can do this part we have discussed in the early part of the class.
just an observation of the data, Nikhil.
So in place of observation means observation, you will provide the count. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So this is the one. Similarly, our dataset name we can define here as biomass. Okay. Now let us go, and if we just provide no libname reference, it will create a copy of that into work. Correct? At the same time, it will provide the dataset has been created and it has been printed. Now tell me this proc contents logic, how we can get the proc contents here. Proc contents data equal to ampersand
DSN.
DSN. Awesome. Next,
Then
run.
in OBS equals to and CND if we want.
No, yes, we can do observations, but we are doing checking the whole content. So it has also created. Okay, because OBS we have used in this logic. We are good. Got the
Yes.
concept. How our for data science purpose also we can use this macro. So this is a solution of all of them. Okay, now we can also use the debug structure. Okay, so probably what will happen if we run this? DSN, we have biomass, debug equal to, we are putting as our semicolon structure, then debug title dataset and DSN semicolon, and let's run this. This is basically for committing the code. It has also created the same output for you. Okay, now we can also use this in this particular format. Where you can see it is going into step by step a symbol gen. We have actually talked about the symbol gen concept. So here this is a debug. It is looking into step by step and it is trying to find out if there is any problem or not, the way we used to do it in a Jupyter notebook. Correct?
Yes.
So now we can also use this for debugging and commenting code both. Some more examples. Again, dataset is biomass. Debug is basically you're putting backslash, and now let's run this. This case also in the log we will be able to see this title and datasets, run, and all the options are coming. So what are the symbol gens are coming into the picture? We can see that the macro variable, this has been created, resolved. So these are basically various techniques of using macro. Similarly, probably I can show you one more example, which we are going to on the SAS help data. So what we are doing over here, it's a macro by name mymac1 data. We are using the example data by name class, which is there into SAS help. This is the data. Same x plus 1 structure we are trying. We are also putting it over here. Then we are putting stars, and this macro is running in the SAS client and creating a SAS dataset in the work library. We are also closing this down. Then we are also providing some more details about host name, thread, and thread ID. And then we are running the whole macro. Let's run and get the result. So it has provided output data because we wanted to create an output in SAS help class. It has all in the log. If we go, it has also provided the informations, all of this information. Now it has been generated. Now you can see this macro is running the SAS client and creating. This is the thread, this one is the thread, and all of information it is actually printing for you. So these are the tricks can help you if you are working on a large data where you want to annotate, comment, find out what are the scenarios are happening, what are the challenges are happening. You'll be able to find out using macro also. We'll see some more interesting examples tomorrow. Those. And now we can see the above examples which we are actually talking about. If we also try to do with the class, so it's the same example which we have understood already. It's going to produce a result for you in the class data with count and DSN. Similarly, in the macro 2, we can also create another macro 2 with mylib class. And if you go into the log, we can see the symbol gen steps, macro 2, and macro running and output structures. Thread informations. Similarly, I will just show one small example of so what we are trying to do here. What we are trying to do here.
We are defining city as New York.
So we are actually creating a city as New York. So for example, if you go into, so now if we run this also, you'll be able to see. We'll always put New York. So in any of the data using the same type, if you want to standardize or change text strings, you will be able to use macro also. And even sometimes you can also write if else logic also along with macro. So let's create another data set. It has been created. My lead. Now I want you to tell some of the macro functions we'll write to explore this data. Could we do a quick exercise before we close for today? We have learned some of the macro functions today, correct? At least some one or
Yes,
two
sir.
quickly. Please tell. I'll keep on writing. For example, percentage. Tell me quickly.
And
Percentage. The percentage late.
oh sorry, मेरे को लगा कि
Okay.
सर एक बार आप
What you want?
बोल सकते हो क्या? मैंने ढंग से सुना नहीं.
Okay, we have actually created this data set, correct? So I think you have also. Acha, okay. First, let us try to do a printing of this data.
So print data
Data
is equal
equal to ID.
my leaf dot run.
Okay. So this is a normal way. Now, if I want to do the same thing with a macro, what shall I do? We have talked about it. I have just given a hint also. What
So
is
that
this? It's a data set.
data equals to
DSN equals to
yeah
space
equals
left
to
help my leaf
name dot yes.
Is correct?
yes sir. फिर next
We
line
use
में
it. Now print data equals to ampersand DSN.
yes sir.
Now let's do something more on this. बाकी भी बोलो ना आप शिल्पी आप कुछ नहीं बोल रहे हो. I can understand Achal is not well. Shilpi, are you audible? Okay. Okay. आप continue करो. Mahindra, Bhavita, please continue. Or any other thing we have to do with this?
TNT
Think over.
observation use कर सकते हैं.
You can
Is equal to
equal to
और कितने ने 5 10
Equal-
ये भी
No, OBS
15 कुछ भी लेते हैं.
OBS equal to 15. We will take observations. OBS equal to 15.
No, first you have to define CNT na count.
Okay.
Otherwise how we can do?
Okay.
फिर
Got it.
then वही pro print data is equal to
Now let me just define it. Sorry. Now proc print data. First you have to define it. Now here it will come. आप जो बोल रहे थे OBS equal to OBS equal to
And
ampersand
CNT.
ampersand CNT. Yeah.
CNT. Good. Now if you do it, run it. Okay. Clear है?
15 observations. Yes, sir.
और क्या कर सकते हैं, बोलो quickly. So
We can
Sir,
do
what
I will
means
any two or three variables.
okay. Proc means she has started with proc means. Let's go with proc means. Data
data
equals to
mileage
ampersand.
No, we
DSN?
already have this defined. Yeah.
DSN.
No, that
DSN.
we have to call DSN here. No?
Yes, sir. Run.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now what all else we can do? Proc
We can do the same for content.
Contents.
content
Data.
Sorry.
Data equals to ampersand DSN.
And के बाद
Ampersand
DSN.
DSN.
Semicolon. Run semicolon.
और
सर टाइटल यूज करने
let's now बोलिए.
सर टाइटल
I'm all in.
टाइटल
Title.
सर इन्वर्टेड कॉमा के अंदर का डेटा समथिंग
My test इस यहाँ पे डेटा का नाम मैं प्रिंट कर रहा हूँ. ओके. एंड बोलिए. एंड sys
okay sir sys date 9 and sys date sys day and sys night.
We can print version number and system information also.
Yes, sir.
बोलिए. and बोलिए.
This var.
Ampersand sys var. Good. It was not showing. Just 1 minute. Let me just scroll it down. Sorry.
For sys var use on version this.
On. Okay.
Will be
On.
more
Correct.
information.
More meaningful.
Sys var. It should be there.
Sys date सर आ गया. VER.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If you print it.
Sir, semicolon then.
Correct.
Put title in proc and run.
सर रन तो किया ही नहीं.
Now
Keep this line title in between proc and run. Now it should work.
perfect.
My test आ तो गया. सर आ तो गया.
It came. That's why I'm just formatting it further. My test data is this thing and state on
System. No, on Python version at the last. In front of system. Now in front of this were on Python version,
On Python is SAS version.
on SAS version.
My test data is this and tested on with all the. Okay, so feeling much more confident now. Tomorrow we'll learn about some more things, so that these are the things we have to complete it. Write a print all the automatic and user defined. Some of the things I think you have already understood now. All automatic and user defined variables. This answer we have already got today, but I will ask you this question tomorrow. There are some more questions, we have to complete this. Okay. So this is the class till today. So everything is clear, fine till now?
Yep.
No any question?
Yep.
Because tomorrow we have to complete totally. This has got some 188 slides plus the various type of examples I want to show it to you, plus some of the videos I want to show it to you, that we have to complete. Actually for macro, even 4 plus 4, 8 hours is less, but now we are trying to complete in 3 plus 3 in 6 hours, but we'll do it. If you can just practice a bit with me, I think we can definitely do it. But hope you have not got any confusion around the concepts today, what we have learned. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Any confusion, Mahendra, Bobita,
No.
Shilpi?
No, sir.
Not still, no. Okay, sure. Thank you. Then we'll continue tomorrow. Bye for
Yep.
now. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, sir.